Hello, my name is Kevin. I am a First Nations advocate with Dementia Australia. For more than 50,000 years, we have come together to trade knowledge, to learn and to teach. Today, we join to keep up that tradition. So with that in mind, we now pay our respects to the traditional owners, to elders past and present, to those First Nations people joining us here today.
Well, my dear, I suppose we should start thinking about clothes to take for our trip. Have you thought about what you'll need to take? How many different occasions are there, or how many different events are there? There's meetings and there's a dinner.
Meetings and a dinner, and flying up and flying back.
Yes.
But flying back will be meeting day.
There'll be days where I'm wearing different earrings, and Tim will say, "Do you realise, you've got one of these and one of those?" And so I'll, go and change one of the earrings, and perhaps be a bit terse. But in actual fact, I'm really pleased that he's doing those things, and telling me that you've got dirty clothes on. I mean, I don't want to wear dirty clothes.
Look, there's no training for this. It's just you do it on the job. You learn on the job, and you make mistakes. I suppose I've made mistakes at times where I'm too directive to Anne, and she doesn't like that. It's important to respect the other person, to listen to them, to affirm them, to be encouraging, to be treated with respect and with love in our case, and to be life-affirming.
This is Hold the Moment. It's a podcast from Dementia Australia. And these are real stories from people living with dementia or caring for their loved ones.
I'm Hamish MacDonald. I cared for my dad, who was living with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia.
And I'm Jim Rogers, and I'm living with younger onset Alzheimer's. If you're a carer, you'll be thinking a lot about how to support your loved one and their decision making. So, how do you do it?
Timothy Peach cares for his wife Anne, who lives with Lewy body dementia. Timothy is committed to supporting Anne in her decision-making, but he says it is a constant balancing act, one that starts at diagnosis.
I think I was very affected by it initially. I was very sad at the diagnosis for Anne, but we had to make some very big decisions pretty quickly, like within 2 years we sold the house that we were living in and had to give up work. So that meant restructuring our finances, and that was a bit to our detriment, but those things had to be done. So it enabled us to plan for the future in a positive way.
Yeah, because those decisions are huge, aren't they, after that diagnosis? And so how do you find on a day-to-day basis now you feel with Anne? Where do you have to sort of step in a little bit to help, and where do you have to back off?
Oh, it's a moving feast, Jim, and I'm sure I don't get it right all the time. And of course, it depends on the particular issue. There are some, of course, very serious issues to do with when we talk about end-of-life issues or care issues. And I'm there to support Anne and make decisions together with her. But for the daily issues, there are times when I need to provide guidance, encouragement, to listen to her, to affirm her, but also to provide some fairly direct advice at times. For instance, Anne used to be a very good cook. She's not interested in cooking anymore, so I do the cooking. I'm not the cook that she was. But I have to really encourage her to eat and drink appropriately. She doesn't drink alcohol anymore, but she's often, that means a bit of coaxing for her to eat.
Reminding.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find as you've progressed over time that you rely on Tim a lot now for decisions that you used to quickly make, and now you feel a little bit unsure and you sort of have to trust and lean on Tim?
I do. People think, I'm fine. There'll be days where I'm wearing different earrings, and Tim will say, do you realise, you've got one of these and one of those? And I'll say, oh, it's the new trend.
You have to be the fashion police.
I've got to be,
right?
yes. And he does. And so I'll, go and change one of the earrings and perhaps be a bit terse. But in actual fact, I'm really pleased that he's doing those things and telling me that, you've got dirty clothes on. I mean, I don't want to wear dirty clothes, and yet Tim can help with doing things like that. He does most of the things during the day, and he's such a help, and I don't give him credit for the things that he does for me, and I love him.
It must be very difficult for you, Tim, with the small things, even down to what Anne eats, to the financial side of things. How do you sort of work out when to take Anne's input and when you have to take the lead for those sort of things?
Look, there's no training for this, as you know, Jim. It's just you do it on the job. You learn on the job, and you make mistakes. I suppose I've made mistakes at times where I'm too directive to Anne, and she doesn't like that. She was a very independent person and had a senior role with she was an advisor to the Health Commission in Victoria, and very competent. And I think, look, it is a matter of me listening to Anne and then working out how best to actually help her. But there are small issues, like if I can mention one issue, it's a tiny bit against Anne, I suppose, and I don't mean to be disrespectful because we are respectful, but often Anne, when we're going away, like when we come here, Anne will like to pack the morning that we're flying interstate.
Yes.
And sometimes there just isn't time to do that. And I'd say, look, we really need to pack those suitcases the night before, and there are lots of excuses why that can't be done because, she's going to use her makeup in the morning or her whatever. And sometimes Anne resists that, and it means that I haven't got the time to help her, advise her what clothes to take in the morning because I'm getting myself ready and so forth. This time, she did it. She packed the day before, and it was so much better. And that took a bit of persuasion on my part. And I think Anne sort of realised that was a better thing to do.
That's a really good example. And also it makes the whole thing smoother and nobody's getting wound up or irritated. Have you noticed more of those things with Anne putting stuff off as she's progressed slightly? Do you think that's one of the changes you've noticed and somewhere where you have to step in a little?
Yes, I think her time management isn't what it used to be. So I have to constantly remind her, we'll be going in quarter of an hour, we'll be going in 10 minutes, we'll be going in 5 minutes, or things like that. Because Anne will tend to think she's got more time up her sleeve than she really does have. So I've got to often remind her about timeframes.
Are there times when things happen and you have to, for you, Tim, have to think, you can't just barge in and make the decision. You've got to tread carefully and sort of win Anne round, so to speak. Can you give us any sort of examples of that?
Well, there was a big, important decision that needed to be made. We'd been living in the Adelaide Hills for 11 years. We brought up our 4 sons there. And then we moved to what we thought would be our sort of semi-retirement house. It was a lovely new house, 2-storey house on a park, lovely environment overlooking trees. Within 6 months of us moving in, Anne was diagnosed with dementia, and I realised that we couldn't stay there for too long. We stayed for about another 2.5 years, but we had seen a retirement apartment that I knew would suit us very well, and I had to persuade Anne that we would need to move out of our lovely house in Glen Osmond into this apartment within a couple of years, and that took a reasonable amount of persuasion. Anne was still a bit reluctant because I think it reminded her of some of the visits that she had made when she was working for people who lived with dementia and visiting them in their homes. Well, it's turned out to be an excellent move. That was 11 years ago, and we are in this retirement village, only 33 apartments, and we are very good friends there, and Anne is very likes living there a lot.
I'll even say that it was a good decision.
So
But I didn't want to go.
No, very hard to let go of your home,
Yes,
your
and also
who
to
you
listen.
are. I mean, it's a big adjustment, right?
Yeah, and to listen to Tim and to trust him,
Yes.
because there's a lot of trust there.
Yeah. And it's letting go of a piece of you
It
in a
is,
way, like
it
your
is.
career, then your home. It's like it's all of those things have to be.
All happened at once. And I guess because I was such an independent person, I didn't like somebody doing those things. But it's the best decision we ever made.
How do you, both of you actually, communicate when it comes to decision making? Do you have a strategy? Do you sit down and discuss it? Or how do you sort of go about some of these decisions now?
A lot of it's really just trusting that Tim has my best interests at heart. And sometimes there'll be times where I think, oh, I'm not sure about that, but it works out, and you're usually right.
He's usually on the money.
Yes, he is, and I've trained him well.
We'll go out for a coffee and we'll talk through an issue. We don't labour over issues terribly much. We tend to sort of get on with it, talk about something or other and then get on with it, implement it. I think when you're a partnership and you're on an equal footing without any pre diagnosis like Anne has, it's all give and take all the time. You're giving and taking and respecting each other's point of view. When a person is diagnosed with dementia, there's a shift in the dynamic between both of us, between the two of us, I think, where it goes more to being, the carer and the person who's being supported.
And that's a big adjustment in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Especially if somebody's got quite a powerful personality, a big career like Anne, and, there's a lot of things that are in that balancing act.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
Is there any sort of supports that you lean on for decision making? Do you find that you do it just yourself, or do you outsource some help from supports anywhere?
We do have close friends, in particular two friends who we divulge quite a lot with them, and we get advice from them and pass things across them from time to time, and don't always agree what they have to say.
But it's always good.
Yeah.
Two heads are better than one, right?
And sometimes it's through talking with other people that you actually come to the decision itself. And it might be that I'm not really keen on the way Tim's handling something, but by the time we've had a decent open discussion with other people, I'll come around and think, yes, that was the right support and the right way of doing things.
So, Tim, you're careful not to just barge in and take over, but are there times when you have to do that?
Well, I think back to I was a manager before I retired, worked with Department of Premier and Cabinet. I managed IT staff, but I think there's an analogy in situational leadership. So leadership can vary. The type of leadership that you give to a group can vary from being very collaborative and seeking a sort of a consensus about which way to go, to being very directive. And I give the example of if there's a fire in the building, you don't ask your team members, now, how do you think we should approach this? And what do you think? Who would like to, do this and so forth? You just put on your hat, which says, I'm the warden, and you get everybody out of that building. And of course, supported decision-making is a continuum between that and the very collaborative and sort of seeking advice and listening. And there have been times when I've had to make decisions for Anne without too much consultation, particularly with certain things that can be safety issues. Like at one stage, her shaver for her legs, she'd leave on the shower room floor, the shower cubicle floor, and I'd say, no,
That's going to
they're
stop.
not to be. You do not do that for your own safety and my safety. Things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a moving feast.
Something else I wanted to ask you, Anne, is you presented, I know this from my notes, that you presented at conferences about support and supportive decision-making. It's a really important topic for you because I know you understand a lot about it. What do you want other people living with dementia to understand about decision-making? What's important for them on this journey?
I think really it's important that you've got to remain humble and you've got to have respect for your partner or your family member who is helping you along this way, and that you're not going to be capable of doing all the things you thought you could do. And just be honest and take that advice and take the help that you can get. And I know that that'll go on, and there'll be times where Tim is doing more for me and making more decisions. And it is hard for me, but it's hard for Tim too, because he knows it's hard for me.
Absolutely.
And it's really important though, because you need that help. Otherwise, you're just living in a muddled mess, trying to make decisions, trying to get through the day, and you can be overloaded with these things. And you know what it's like if you get anxious, you can't make any decisions. And I think that it's, for somebody living with dementia, giving up some of those aspects is really difficult.
They're big milestones,
It's a real challenge. And a lot of people don't have the beauty of having somebody like Tim.
No.
And some of them are by themselves. And they might have external help making decisions, helping them. And you just hope like mad that other people, the input that they have has actually got the person's heart.
Their best interests.
Yeah, and that they really care about that person as an individual with their own individual needs and things and rights. You know, I've got the right to say, no, I don't want that. But I've also, know that Tim is really...
Has your best interest at heart.
Yeah, I trust him.
It's important to respect the other person, to listen to them, to affirm them, to be encouraging, to at times prompt them, help them with prompting for, what might be good advice. But on the whole, just treating them as they have the right, of course, to be treated with respect and with love in our case, and to be life-affirming.
Supported decision-making in itself is much bigger than just some laws. It's every little detail about how we interact with each other and the ways we come to trust another person to share those things that we might need in order to have help on those decisions about our life. But that requires a bit of a legal structure to enable it to happen.
If you're supporting a loved one in their decision-making, you're going to have to work through some thorny issues. How do you know you're honouring someone's wishes when their wishes start to change?
Yeah, exactly. Or how will you support someone's decision-making if they can no longer communicate with you the way they used to?
These are huge and really important questions, and they're the kinds of questions that researchers like Dr. Craig Sinclair are asking. Craig is a senior research fellow in the School of Psychology at the University of New South Wales. He also works with Neuroscience Research Australia, known as Neura.
Craig, could you please tell us a bit about your work on supported decision-making?
Supported decision-making is a relatively new concept in terms of its legal recognition. But basically, it is a simple idea on the surface. It's the idea that we, like all of us, have help and assistance in making decisions and going about living our lives. So we all have that experience, I think, of helping people make decisions, but also having that help when we need it. For me, it comes up particularly, when I take my car to the mechanic. I've got no skills in that area. I rely on the help of a qualified person to talk me through the different issues that I need to think about. But when we think about it in the context of people with cognitive or communication changes or disabilities, this is a way of giving a legal recognition to that process of having the usual help and assistance in making decisions, so that those even important life decisions can be recognised at a legal level.
This term, I guess, is quite new in the dementia space for anyone that's listening to this, that's living through it themselves or dealing with a family member. It's a term that you suddenly start to hear. Why is it, in your mind, why is it so important that we are talking about this particular idea, this concept?
We now have a lot of evidence that shows that people living with dementia can continue making decisions, living meaningful lives with the right type of help at different stages of their journey. And so I think because there's such a stigma out there, and for many people there has been that stereotype that a diagnosis of a condition like dementia has perhaps this legal implication that now a person is less able or unable to make decisions, that can be really impactful on the lives of people affected. And it goes a long way to creating that fear around the condition as well.
I remember the first conversation I had with Jim when we started making this. You told me about losing your driver's license, which was a decision that was made for you.
Awful.
Which you were very upset about. Probably still are a bit.
Very.
So that's an example of where someone with a diagnosis can't make that decision. It's made for them. So what are we talking about here?
What we're talking about is, I think, the whole span of decisions that a person might encounter in their life. And it means that it takes us into those messy, confusing places where we're balancing things like a person's autonomy and their rights, but also their safety and the safety of the community around that person as well. So when we encounter decisions about things like whether a person can continue to drive, that's a decision that is not only, for example, if it were me, it's not only impactful on my life, but it has impacts on the lives of people around me and the community.
So this concept is not about saying, regardless of your diagnosis, you make every decision on your own. This is something different. It's somewhere in between.
Yeah. At a legal level, for a long time, we have been equating a person's mental ability with their recognition before the law. And that's a big part of this change that has come all the way from the United Nations and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, is to say those two things are actually separate. A person's mental abilities may be, there may be a disability there, or it may be changing over time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is now unrecognised by the law. And through different types of support, people can continue to make decisions about their own lives, or to express things in ways that the law can recognise in the future if they're no longer able to communicate or to make those decisions at that time.
And here in Australia, that's now part of the new Aged Care Act, isn't it?
There are now frameworks in place in the new Aged Care Act, which is really exciting because it's the first, I think, large-scale implementation of a system that will enable supported decision-making. Supported decision-making in itself is much bigger than just some laws. It's every little detail about how we interact with each other and the ways we come to trust another person to share those things that we might need in order to have help on those decisions about our life. But that requires a bit of a legal structure to enable it to happen. For example, a supporter may need access to some information in order to understand what a person needs. And if they were maybe interacting with a bank or a hospital, it's very hard to get access to that information due to privacy laws. At another level, the supporters, we want to make sure that they're acting responsibly and actually in the right spirit of assisting the person. So the law creates some duties that they have in their role to support the person but not make decisions for them. So the way that could look in practice is a person who's attending maybe a GP appointment with somebody, helping to translate complex language into language that they know the person would understand. Someone who can take a complex decision and break it down into smaller parts. Someone who can do things like sharing one idea at a time, speaking at the right pace or in the right tone that they know the person responds to, knowing the good times of day that person is going to be more able to engage in perhaps the more complex parts of a decision that they're thinking about. So it is it's complex at one level, but it boils down to the sort of simple things that we do with people we know well, that hopefully will help them to express what's important to them in their life.
So I'm just mindful there's probably a lot of people listening to this that are maybe in the thick of things with a family member. Mum, dad says, I don't want to leave home. I don't want to go into residential care. You have to respect that.
So I think there's some things to tease out of that. And the first would come back to the actual human rights basis of this, which is not to say, human rights doesn't say that everyone must now make all their own decisions and you have to have help and you have to exhaust yourself every day making every single decision about your life when you're now living with another condition that's making your thinking change. It doesn't say that. What it says is that this support is people have a right to access this support at an international level. And countries like Australia who've signed on to this convention have the commitment to make that access to that support progressively realised. It's always a voluntary process to have support in decision making, and you can exercise your autonomy at any time by saying, no, I don't mind. I don't want to make that decision. What will be will be. So those sorts of protections need to be there. That this is not actually impinging people in another way, which is creating this expectation that you have to now be superhuman and make every decision. At the level of what we're seeing coming in the Aged Care Act, it is also not creating a direct expectation that care workers operate outside their scope of practice or spend all their time doing supported decision-making instead of achieving the care minutes that residential care home needs to meet. The resourcing it's designed to create a framework for the things that carers are already doing and to give them the access to be able to do that. But where it differs from what we have known or what we have been used to doing for a long time is that it doesn't empower those supporters to make decisions for the other person, to come in and impose over the top and say, this is the decision that will happen.
Craig, if our listeners were to take away one idea from this entire conversation, what do you think that would be that they would like to hear?
I think the most important idea I'd like to leave you with is that a person who's diagnosed with a dementia, that in itself is not a proxy for saying that a person can't make decisions about their life or can't express themselves. I think we really need to move beyond that belief and to look at each individual and understand what is that person's decision-making abilities and what are their needs for support, and that people living with dementia can hopefully live more meaningful and engaged lives where they make decisions about their life.
That's Dr. Craig Sinclair from the University of New South Wales.
You also heard from Anne and Timothy Peach. Hold the Moment is a podcast from Dementia Australia, produced by Dead Set Studios.
You can find more episodes and resources on Dementia Australia's website, dementia.org.au. And make sure you're following Hold the Moment so you don't miss an episode.
This show is hosted by me, Jim Rogers.
And by me, Hamish McDonald. The executive producers are Kelly Reardon and Sarah Dabro. The producer is Liam Reardon. Production manager is Anne Chesterman. Sound design by Slade Gibson.
And a special thanks to the whole team at Dementia Australia and to everyone who shared their stories on this podcast.